Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The chopsticks slipped from Jake Murphy's fingers for the third time, sending a spray of synthetic beef broth across the cracked display screen. On it, Ross Geller was explaining something about dinosaurs to a bored-looking Martian colonist. Season 47 had really jumped the shark. Existential query. If noodles fall in space and no one witnesses, do they still stain? The voice emanated from the battered microwave bolted to the wall of Jake's converted cargo shuttle. "Shut up, Mike." Jake retrieved the floating chopsticks and stabbed at another clump of noodles. Outside the viewport, Saturn's rings glittered like broken glass against the void. He'd been parked in the outer shipping lanes for 6 hours now, waiting for a fare that probably wouldn't come. The cheap seats of the cosmic gig economy. The shuttle, christened Rust Bucket in a moment of bitter honesty, groaned as a larger vessel swept past, its wake rippling the artificial gravity. Loose objects drifted in slow, clumsy arcs, like a half-hearted ballet dot including Jake's dinner. Son of a... He lunged for the noodle cup, catching it just before it decorated the already stained ceiling. The movement sent him spinning slowly until his foot hooked under the pilot's seat. A news ticker scrolled across the bottom of his screen. Stellardyne stock soars as new Murphy Tech navigation system prevents 1,000th collision. Murphy Tech. His name on someone else's billions. Jake jabbed the screen off with enough force to crack it further. 5 years since Marcus Webb had stolen everything. His asteroid avoidance algorithm, his reputation, even his fiancée. "You're too naive for this industry, Murphy," Webb had said at the tribunal, Kira's hand already in his. "Some people are meant to create, others are meant to capitalize." The comm unit chirped. Jake almost ignored it, probably another request to haul bio-waste to the Jupiter processing plants. But the rate display made him look twice. Triple standard. Cash only. Pickup coordinates near mining station 779, abandoned for a decade after the vein ran dry. His finger hovered over the decline button. Triple rate meant trouble. Triple rate meant someone was running from something or someone. Triple rate meant complications. The rent notice taped to his air recycler caught his eye. 3 cycles overdue. Next step was repo, and living in actual space wasn't much of an option. Practical observation. Poverty overrides caution with statistical significance. "Nobody asked you," Jake muttered, accepting the fare. The Rust Bucket's engines wheezed to life, a sound like an asthmatic dragon clearing its throat. The shuttle lurched toward the coordinates, leaving a trail of condensation that immediately froze into ice crystals. Mining Station 779 floated dark against the stars, its skeletal framework picked clean by scavengers. Jake found his passenger at Docking Bay 3, standing at a vending machine that definitely hadn't been there when the station was operational. The machine's cheerful neon proclaimed, "Plot Armor Insurance, your Deus Ex Machina, when you need it most." The woman feeding credits into it appeared to be roughly 80 in Earth years, though with off-worlders you never knew. Her skin had a green tint that looked natural rather than cosmetic, and her white hair was twisted into a bun that seemed to mock the very laws of physics. She wore a floral dress that belonged in a retirement home, not an abandoned mining station. "Premium package for 7 cycles, please," she told the machine in accented standard. The accent was hard to place, melodic with rolled R's and elongated vowels. "Ma'am?" Jake kept his hand near the emergency beacon on his belt. "You called for a ride?" She turned and her eyes were sharp as surgical lasers, despite the grandmotherly smile. "Oh yes, to the Jolly Quark station, please. I'm visiting my granddaughter." She collected her insurance package, a small silver disc, and tucked it into her enormous purse. "You can call me Nana. Everyone does." Jake glanced around the empty docking bay. No luggage, no escort, No explanation for why an elderly woman was buying insurance at a derelict station. But triple rate was triple rate. Right this way. He helped her across the questionable gravity threshold into the rust bucket. She moved with surprising grace for someone her age, barely needing his steadying hand. Oh my! She stopped dead in front of Mike, her eyes widening. One weathered hand reached out to trace the symbols etched into the microwave's casing, symbols Jake had always assumed were just scratches. A microwave integrated Cosmo engine. I haven't seen one in, it must be centuries. It's just a microwave. Got it at a pawn shop for 3 zels. Jake squeezed past her to the pilot's seat. Claims to be sentient, but mostly just makes bad jokes. Greetings, descendant of creators. Mike's voice suddenly resonated with harmonics Jake had never heard before. Current status, degraded to kitchen appliance. Status acknowledged. C, malfunction. Jake initiated the departure sequence, trying to ignore the way Nana was studying both him and Mike with intense interest. Should take about 6 hours to the Jolly Quark if we don't hit any. The proximity alarm screamed. 3 ships materialized from behind the station's bulk, their hulls decorated with the universal symbol of bad news. Skull and crossbones updated for the space age, with the skull wearing a helmet and the bones replaced by laser cannons. Pirates, Jake breathed, his hands already flying over the controls. Hold on to something. Such excitement. Nana clutched her purse, seeming more delighted than terrified. The lead pirate ship fired a tractor beam, catching the rust bucket in a grip like a fist of light. Jake's standard evasion protocols were useless. The shuttle's engines simply weren't powerful enough to break free. Come on, come on! He cycled through defensive options. Shields at 12%. Weapons consisted of a mining laser he'd never gotten around to removing. They were dead in vacuum. His flailing hand hit a switch he'd never noticed before, hidden under Mike's power cord. The microwave hummed, then spoke in that strange new voice. Shield porridge protocol activated, deploying defensive substrate. What the hell is shield pour? Space around them turned into soup. A gelatinous energy field erupted from the rust bucket's hull, translucent and shimmering like oil on water. The tractor beam hit it and refracted into 1,000 harmless ribbons of light. Better yet, the field expanded outward in waves, each one thicker than the last. The pirate ships tried to reverse, but space had become molasses. Jake watched in amazement as they struggled like flies in amber, their engines firing uselessly against the expanding goo. Remarkable! Nana clapped her hands. Though in my day we called it shield kasha. The porridge translation never quite captured the elegance. Something in her voice made Jake turn. She was standing perfectly balanced despite the shuttle's erratic movements, and was that a small silver device in her hand? She tucked it back into her purse before he could get a good look, but the pirate's comm chatter had suddenly turned to static. We should go, she suggested mildly. The field will dissipate in about 3 minutes. Jake didn't need to be told twice. He pushed the rust bucket's engines to their limit, leaving the pirates cursing in their gelatinous prison. They flew in silence for an hour before Jake finally asked, "What just happened?" "You saved an old woman from pirates." Nana's eyes twinkled. Surely that's worth triple rate. The Jolly Quark station was supposed to be a standard trading post. Jake had been there dozens of times, picking up passengers who couldn't afford the major lines. But as they approached, he noticed something different. Ships he didn't recognize, sleek and organic-looking, with hulls that seemed to shift between green and silver depending on the angle. "Docking Bay 1, please," Nana instructed. Jake's stomach dropped. Bay 1 was never open to civilian traffic. It was reserved for the honor guard was waiting. 20 soldiers in ceremonial armor that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced, their green-tinted faces solemn under elaborate helmets. They dropped to one knee as Nana descended the ramp. "Your Majesty," they chorused. Jake's legs went numb. "Your what now?" Nana, no, the Empress Mother of Zeltaria, if the elaborate throne they were now escorting her to was any indication, turned back with that same grandmotherly smile. "Didn't I mention? How forgetful of me." The throne room materialized around them. Jake hadn't even noticed being herded inside. Banners showing constellations he didn't recognize. Courtiers with that same green-tinted skin, all staring at him like he was a particularly interesting specimen. And there, carved into what looked like marble but probably cost more than a planet, was a plaque. Law Hash 42, on lawn gratitude. Whosoever saves the life of royal blood shall receive the heart's reward. Union with a match among the royal line. Subsection C. In case of refusal, the savior shall be repurposed as nutrient-rich fertilizer for the imperial lawns. "Lawn?" Jake repeated. "You'll turn me into grass." Exceptionally fertile soil. The roses, in particular, thrive on human-based fertilizer. Before Jake could process that he was being threatened with death by gardening, the throne room doors exploded open. She entered like a storm given form, black hair whipping behind her, her stride devouring the distance with predatory grace. Her skin had the same green tint as the others, but on her it looked like sea foam over pearl. Blue eyes blazed above cheekbones that could cut glass. The plasma rifle in her hands was definitely not ceremonial, but it was her body that made Jake's brain temporarily forget about the lawn threat. She moved like a dancer, and a fighter had produced offspring and raised it on a diet of pure confidence. The tactical suit she wore left very little to the imagination while somehow maintaining an air of regal authority. "Be gentle with her," she said, the rifle's barrel hovering somewhere near Jake's nose. His mouth went dry. "With the gun?" "With her." The princess, because this had to be the princess, the universe wouldn't waste that level of gorgeous on anyone else, jerked her head toward the Empress. "My grandmother. If she decides you're cute, the wedding moves to tomorrow. If she thinks you're adorable, it's tonight." The Empress clapped her hands. "Oh, Fleur, don't threaten the poor boy. He's already had such an exciting day." She studied Jake with those laser-sharp eyes. "Though he does have a certain scruffy charm." "Grandmama, no." Fleur, Princess Fleur de Neri, heir to the Zeltarian Empire, according to the functionary's whispered commentary, lowered the rifle but kept it ready. "We discussed this. No more surprise betrothals." "It's not a surprise if it's the law, dear." Jake raised a tentative hand. Could someone explain what's happening? Slowly? With small words? Fleur's eyes fixed on him, and he felt like a bug under a microscope, a bug that she was considering whether to study or squash. "You saved the Empress. Ancient law says you get a reward. That reward is me." Her perfect lips twisted in disgust. "Congratulations, Earthboy. You've won the lottery from hell." The ZNN studio reeked of industrial-strength hairspray and desperation. Jake tugged at the collar of his borrowed suit, borrowed being a generous term for something that probably cost more than his shuttle, while makeup artists dabbed powder on his perpetually stubbled face. "Stop fidgeting," Fleur hissed beside him. She looked devastating in a dress that shifted from emerald to midnight blue as she moved, but her smile had all the warmth of deep space. "We rehearsed this." "We rehearsed you not threatening to shoot me for 20 minutes, Jake muttered back. "That's not exactly media training." 3 weeks into their arranged courtship, and they'd developed a routine. Public appearances where they played the perfect couple, private moments where Fleur outlined exactly how she'd dispose of his body if he embarrassed her empire. Jake had started rating her death threats for creativity. Yesterday's "Feed you to the quantum squids of Epsilon 5" had scored a solid 8. The host, a Betelgeusian with too many teeth and not enough boundaries, leaned forward as the cameras went live. "So, Jake Murphy, The man who went from fixing toasters to winning the heart of the galaxy's most eligible princess. Tell us, what's it really like? Jake opened his mouth to deliver the prepared response about honor and destiny. What came out was terrifying. Fleur's hand found his thigh under the desk. Her nails dug in just enough to promise consequences. But also, Jake continued, and maybe it was the pressure of her fingers or the way the studio lights caught the subtle green undertones in her skin. I've never met anyone who makes me want to be better. Not successful or rich or famous, just better. Like maybe the best version of myself might actually be worth something. The studio went silent. Even the Betelgeusian stopped grinning. Fleur turned to stare at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, her blue eyes showed something other than irritation or calculation. Before he could apologize for going off script, she grabbed his face and kissed him. Not a camera-friendly kiss, not a diplomatic press event kiss. The kind of kiss that made the studio monitors fog up and caused Mike, watching from the green room, to announce, probability of genuine affection, 73.6%, recalculating, 74.2%, unusual variance detected. When they finally broke apart, Jake's brain felt like it had been rebooted in safe mode. Fleur's lipstick was smudged, and she looked as shocked as he felt. Well, the host fanned himself with his cue cards. I think that answers everyone's questions. But in a corporate tower 3 systems away, Varen Lacrima watched the broadcast with interest. The CEO of Galacticor paused the feed on Fleur's face, on that moment of unguarded emotion. So the princess has a weakness after all, he murmured to his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 127 years old, he looked not a day over 30, as long as you didn't notice the way his skin occasionally rippled, like something underneath was trying to escape. His assistant, a nervous Rigelian with too many eyes, cleared 3 of his throats. Sir, we've intercepted communications from the princess's private laboratory. She's close to synthesizing the Zeltarian rejuvenation compound, without the environmental dependency. It appears so, sir. Varon's reflection smiled, and for a moment his face aged decades before the stabilizers kicked in. Double our fleet presence around Zeltaria, and prepare the Kronos weapons, if they won't share their fountain of youth willingly. He touched the window, leaving a handprint that was somehow both young and ancient. Will age their entire ecosystem into dust and sift through the remains. Back in the palace, Jake was trying to process what had happened. The kiss, the way Fleur had looked at him, the fact that she hadn't threatened him once during the entire ride home. He found her in her laboratory, a converted ballroom where traditional Zeltarian growing pods mingled with cutting-edge Earth tech. She was bent over a microscope, her hair tied back in a messy bun that made her look younger, more approachable. That was good television, she said without looking up. Right, television. Jake picked up a stylus, fidgeting with it. Very convincing. Convincing. She adjusted the microscope's focus. Yes. They stood in uncomfortable silence while Mike, who Jake had started bringing everywhere, offered unhelpful commentary. Atmospheric tension exceeds recommended parameters. Suggestion: copulation or combat to restore equilibrium. Could you maybe not? Jake muttered. Fleur finally looked up, and there was something raw in her expression. I need to tell you something. If this is about the kiss, I chose you. The words tumbled out like she was ripping off a bandage. Not randomly, not because you saved my grandmother. I studied thousands of profiles, ran probability matrices, analyzed psychological patterns. I knew you'd be at that station. I knew you'd take the fare. I knew you'd activate Mike's defense systems. Jake's stomach dropped. What? Your personality profile was perfect. A lazy genius with a good heart. Ambitious enough to solve problems, lazy enough to avoid creating them. someone who'd been betrayed, who understood the cost of trust. She pulled up a holographic display showing his entire life in data points. I orchestrated everything. The stylus snapped in Jake's hand. Just like Marcus, just like Kira. Everyone always has a plan for good old Jake Murphy. That's not... No, I get it. He backed toward the door. Why tell the Mark what the game is? Much easier to just move the pieces around. The betrayal cut deeper than it should have. He'd started to believe maybe this was real. Maybe someone could actually want him for him. Congratulations, Princess. You got your perfect puppet. He left before she could respond, before he could see the way her carefully constructed composure crumbled. The 30-cycle trial period expired at midnight. Neither of them mentioned it. At 12:01, proximity alarms screamed across Zeltaria. Jake watched from the Rust Bucket's viewport as Galactic Corp's fleet materialized. Hundreds of ships, each one bristling with weapons he didn't recognize. Chronos cannons detected, Mike announced. Temporal acceleration weaponry. Probability of planetary survival, 12.3%. Jake's hands were already on the controls. He could run. The trial period was over, the contract void. He had no obligation to stay, to fight, to care about a planet full of people who'd manipulated him. The engines hummed to life. On the palace monitors, he could see Fleur coordinating defenses, her face set in determination even as the odds displayed in bloody red. She'd used him, yes, but she was still going to fight, still going to try to save her people, even if it was hopeless. Damn it, Jake muttered, powering down the engines. Damn it all to... Such language! Nana materialized in his passenger seat like she'd always been there. No disguise this time, just a grandmother in a floral dress carrying cookies that smelled impossibly like Earth, like home, like his mother's kitchen before everything went wrong. How did you... Old woman's prerogative. She offered him a cookie. Snickerdoodles, my husband's recipe. He was human, you know. Crashed on Zeltaria 60 years ago. Terrible pilot, wonderful man. Jake took a cookie numbly. It tasted like childhood and safety and all the things he'd stopped believing in. He was broken too when I met him, Nana continued. Running from 3 failed marriages and a gambling debt that technically classified him as a small moon in terms of gravitational pull on the economy. She smiled at the memory. I didn't choose him despite his flaws, dear boy. I chose him because of them. She lied to me. She told you the truth. That's rather different from lying, don't you think? Nana bit into her own cookie. Perfect people make terrible partners. They never need you. But someone who's been broken and chooses to love anyway, that's real strength. That's real beauty. How do you know I love her? Because you're still here. She stood, leaving the cookie tin on the seat. The trial period ended 13 minutes ago. You're free to leave. Yet here you sit, in a rusty shuttle, watching her fight impossible odds and breaking your own heart because you think you don't deserve to be chosen. She patted his cheek with a hand that smelled like cinnamon. My granddaughter didn't manipulate you, Jake Murphy. She chose you. There's a difference if you're brave enough to see it. She vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared, leaving only the lingering scent of snickerdoodles and the echo of truth. Outside, the first Chronos cannon fired. A beam of concentrated time hit Zeltaria's outer defense platform. Jake watched in horror as the metal aged centuries and seconds, rust spreading like cancer before the entire structure crumbled to dust. On the comm channel, he could hear Veron's voice, smooth as poisoned honey. Princess Daenerys, this is unnecessary. Share your research. Give us the secret of eternal youth, and your people need not suffer. Counteroffer, Fleur's voice crackled back. Go to hell. Another Chronos beam lanced out. Another defense platform died of old age. Jake looked at the cookie tin, at Mike, at his reflection in the dark viewport, scruffy, tired, scared. Not hero material, not prince material, Just Jake Murphy, failed engineer and successful coward. But maybe, just maybe, the kind of man who could love someone who chose him not despite his flaws, but because of them. "Mike," he said quietly, "you remember that thing you did with the shield porridge?" Shield Kasha protocol remains in memory. Think you could do it again, but bigger? Like really stupidly bigger? Calculating. Power requirements would exceed safe parameters by 4,847%. Perfect. Jake's fingers flew over the controls, plotting a course straight toward the Galacticor fleet. "Let's go save my fiancé." Clarification: trial period has expired. I know. Jake hit the throttle and the rust bucket lurched toward what was probably certain death. That's what makes it romantic. Mike was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, probability of survival, 0.3%. Probability of successful courtship, 87.2%. Acceptable parameters, initiating maximum stupidity mode. The rust bucket accelerated toward the enemy fleet, one battered shuttle against an armada, while on Zeltaria, a princess watched her tactical display with growing disbelief and a wild, desperate hope. The rust bucket screamed toward the Galacticor fleet, like a moth with delusions of grandeur attacking a forest fire. Jake's knuckles went white on the controls as a dozen targeting locks painted his hull. 17 weapon systems acquiring lock, Mike announced with disturbing cheer. "Shall I play your funeral dirge? I have downloaded several appropriate selections." Not helping. Jake jerked the shuttle into a spiral that would have been elegant if the rust bucket hadn't groaned like a dying whale. A Kronos beam seared past, close enough that Jake's stubble aged 3 days instantly. His comm unit crackled. "Jake, what the hell are you doing?" Fleur's voice, tight with something that might have been fear. "Saving our planet, apparently." He dove under a cruiser's belly using its bulk as temporary cover. "You said our, by the way. When you called me, technically, king. That was nice." "This isn't the time for—" An explosion cut her off. Through the viewport, Jake saw one of Zeltaria's orbital platforms bloom into fire. "Jake, get out of there, please." The please nearly broke his concentration. Princess Fleur de Neyret didn't say please. She commanded, demanded, occasionally threatened. She didn't plead. "Can't do that." Jake spotted Varen's flagship, a massive dreadnought that looked like someone had weaponized a small moon. "But hey, remember that temporal virus you synthesized? The one in your lab? Bottom shelf, blue container labeled Absolutely Do Not Steal." Silence. Then, "You didn't." "I absolutely did. Your security is terrible, by the way. One DNA scanner. I just held up a cup you'd been drinking from." Jake patted his jacket pocket where the vial sat, warm against his chest. "So here's the plan. I get this to Varen. You keep the planet from exploding and we meet for dinner at 8. That place with the gravity-defying souffle." "That's not a plan. That's suicide with dinner reservations." "I prefer to think of it as aggressively optimistic scheduling." A new voice cut into the channel, smooth, cultured, and colder than space itself. "Mr. Murphy, how delightful." Varen Lacrima's face appeared on Jake's cracked display screen. The CEO looked perfectly preserved, like someone had laminated a 30-year-old and forgotten to add personality. "I've been reviewing your file. Quite the fall from grace. From revolutionary engineer to, what was it? Appliance repair? I prefer mechanical wellness consultant." Jake banked hard as another Kronos beam turned a piece of debris into prehistoric dust. Better hours, less backstabbing. Such wit. Tell me, does it bother you that Marcus Webb built an empire on your work? That he's living your life while you deliver drunks to Saturn's casino stations? Jake's jaw clenched. 5 years of buried rage bubbled up, hot and familiar. "You know what? Yeah, it bothered me. Kept me up at night, made me see his face in every success story, her face in every happy couple. Then you understand. Varen's image flickered, his face aging decades before stabilizers kicked in. The injustice of it, the theft. Why should mediocrities prosper while genuine visionaries suffer? Because that's life, you pretentious ass. Jake laughed, surprising himself. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. The universe doesn't keep score. But here's what I learned. The best revenge isn't becoming Marcus Webb. It's being happy despite him. He killed the comm and punched the throttle. The rust bucket lurched forward, aimed directly at Varen's flagship. Mike, remember that shield porridge thing? Shield Kasha protocol ready. Warning, power drain will exceed. Yeah, we'll explode. Got it. On my mark. Behind him, space erupted into chaos. 8 sleek fighters screamed out of hyperspace, each one painted with elaborate tentacle motifs. Prince Octonius's voice boomed across all frequencies. For the glory of love and healthy communication in relationships. What? Jake nearly crashed into a frigate. I have been attending therapy, the prince continued, his fighters laying down devastating cover fire. Dr. Kleenax says I must verbalize my emotional support. On Zeltaria's surface, Nana stood in the palace war room wearing her floral dress and a bandolier of thermal detonators. Knitting circle, execute pattern, aggressive grandmother. Around her, 24 elderly Zeltarian ladies dropped their knitting needles and pulled out military-grade weapons. They moved with lethal precision, taking control of planetary defense grids that had been mysteriously maintained by a helpful old lady for the past several decades. Such nice boys, Nana said, watching Galacticorp soldiers flee from a grandmother wielding dual plasma cannons. But they really should have eaten their vegetables. Jake reached the flagship's shield perimeter. Varen's face reappeared on his screen, no longer smiling. You think you can breach my defenses in that scrap heap? Nope. Jake's finger hovered over Mike's activation switch. But I don't need to breach them. I just need to stick to them. Mike, now. The shield porridge, shield kasha, whatever it was, erupted from the rust bucket like the universe's worst case of indigestion. The gelatinous energy field expanded instantly, swallowing Jake's shuttle and spreading across Varen's shields. The two systems merged, tangled, became a single writhing mass of confused energy. And Jake, inside his dying shuttle, punched through both. The rust bucket hit Varen's hull with all the grace of a drunk asteroid. Jake barely managed to grab the virus vial and Mike's core unit before impact. He tumbled through twisted metal into the flagship's corridor, tasting blood and victory in equal measure. Structural integrity compromised, Mike observed from under Jake's arm. Also, you are bleeding from several locations. Just a flesh wound. Jake struggled to his feet. 3 flesh wounds, actually, maybe 4. Which way to the command center? Follow the pretentious decor. The corridors were exactly what Jake expected from a man obsessed with youth, everything gleaming and new, like a hospital that had mated with a luxury resort. He passed door after door of stabilization chambers, each one containing different versions of the same preservation technology. The command center doors opened before he reached them. Varen stood in the center, surrounded by a forest of IVs and monitoring equipment. Up close, Jake could see the truth. The man's skin rippled constantly, age and youth fighting for dominance across his features. You know what the funny thing is? Varen didn't turn around. I've extended my life by 97 years. 97 years of board meetings and profit margins and watching everyone around me age while I stay perpetually 30-ish. He finally faced Jake, and his eyes were older than his manufactured face. And I still dream about her. My mother. She died at 32. I'm quadruple the age she ever reached, and I still wake up crying for her. Jake's hand tightened on the virus vial. So this is all mommy issues? This is about justice. Varen's control slipped, his face aging rapidly before machines pumped stabilizers into his veins. Why should death be democratic? Why should genius die while idiots live? I've contributed more to this galaxy than any 10 ordinary people. Your mother was ordinary people, Jake said quietly. Did she deserve to die? Varen went very still. That's the thing about trying to beat death, Jake continued, moving closer. You think you're honoring the dead, but you're just running from grief. And the thing about running. He pulled out the vial, its contents glowing soft blue. Eventually you trip. Varen lunged for him, moving with artificial speed. But Jake had spent 5 years dodging debt collectors, responsibilities, feelings. He twisted away, smashed the vial against Varen's chest, and watched the temporal virus spread like living light across the CEO's skin. What did you... Varan stopped mid-sentence. His face began cycling through ages. Child, teenager, adult, elderly, then back again. But his eyes stayed conscious, aware, trapped in a body experiencing every moment of its existence simultaneously. It won't kill you, Jake said, backing away as Varen fell to his knees. Fleur designed it that way. She said death was too easy, that you needed to understand what you were trying to steal. Every second of life, all at once, forever present, never moving forward. Varen's last coherent words came out in a voice that was both child and ancient. I just wanted more time with her. The flagship's systems began failing without Varen's conscious control. Jake grabbed Mike and ran, his body screaming protests with every step. He made it to an escape pod just as the first explosion started. The pod ejected into space, tumbling end over end. Through the viewport, Jake watched Galactic Corp's fleet power down, their Chronos weapons dying as their command structure collapsed. On every frequency, Prince Octonius was singing what might have been a victory song or a mating call. With his species, it was hard to tell. Jake. Fleur's voice cut through the chaos. Jake, where are you? Floating, he managed, trying not to notice how much blood was pooling in the pod. Bit tired. Might take a nap. Don't you dare. I'm not explaining to my grandmother that you died before the wedding. There's going to be a wedding. Of course there's going to be a wedding, you idiot. The trial period ended and neither of us said anything. Oh, Jake's vision blurred. That's nice. The last thing he saw before passing out was Fleur's ship approaching, her face on the monitor looking furious and terrified and beautiful. He woke up 3 days later in the palace medical bay, with Mike humming contentedly on the bedside table and Fleur asleep in a chair beside him, her hand wrapped around his. Greeting, former corpse, Mike announced. You have been promoted to king while unconscious. Also, the wedding is tomorrow. What? Jake tried to sit up, immediately regretted it. Fleur stirred, her blue eyes snapping open. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then she punched him in the shoulder, the uninjured one, thankfully. That's for almost dying. She kissed him, fierce and desperate. And that's for coming back. I'm confused about mixed signals here. Get used to it. You're marrying into a very complicated family. She pulled back, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. I need to tell you something. My psychological profile of you, it didn't predict you'd be perfect for the kingdom. It predicted you'd be perfect for me. Someone who'd only fight for love, not power. Someone who'd choose happiness over revenge. Someone who'd look at an arranged marriage to an alien princess and make jokes instead of running. To be fair, I did try to run. But you came back. She traced a finger along his jaw. That's what the profile couldn't predict, that you'd come back for me. Our planet, Jake corrected. You said our planet. She smiled and it transformed her entire face. Yes, our planet, our people, Our future delivery empire, apparently. Nana's already drawn up business plans. The wedding happened the next day, because Nana threatened to plan an even bigger one if they waited. Jake stood at the altar in a suit that actually fit, watching Fleur walk toward him in a dress that seemed to be made of condensed starlight. Prince Octonius officiated, all 8 arms conducting the vows like a one-alien orchestra. "I spent my whole life avoiding complications," Jake said during his toast, raising a glass of something that tasted like champagne mixed with cosmic radiation. "Turns out the best things in life are complications, especially green-skinned ones with plasma rifles and doctorate degrees." "Don't forget the grandmother who's secretly a ninja," Nana called out, already 3 drinks in and arm-wrestling one of Octonius's cousins. Above them, fireworks exploded in patterns that looked suspiciously like targeting algorithms, Mike's contribution to the celebration. The microwave had somehow achieved full sentience during the battle and was now considered a citizen of Zeltaria. "Probability of happily ever after, 87.3%, Mike announced. "Only 87%? Jake asked. "Accounting for standard marital disputes, alien cultural differences, and your tendency to leave wet towels on the bathroom floor." Fleur laughed, pulling Jake into another kiss while their guests cheered. "I'll take those odds." 6 months later, Parsec Express was the fastest-growing delivery service in 3 galaxies. Their fleet, repurposed from the Royal Navy, spelled out different messages in space each week. This week it was, "Tip your delivery person." Their first customer had indeed been Varen, ordering pizza from his temporal rehabilitation facility. The note had read, "For yesterday, if possible. P.S. Thank you." Jake had delivered it personally, bringing breadsticks and a photo Fleur had found in the archives. Varen's mother, smiling, captioned with, "She would want you to live, not just survive." Now, watching the sunset from their palace balcony while Mike experimented with molecular gastronomy in the kitchen, Jake pulled Fleur closer. "Any regrets?" she asked. "Just one." He grinned. "I should have let your grandmother arrange the kidnapping sooner." "That was not a kidnapping. It was a creative interpretation of rideshare services." They bickered happily into the night, while above them the delivery fleet rearranged itself one more time, just married, still. And in the kitchen, Mike calculated the probability of love lasting forever, then stopped. Some things didn't need statistics. They only needed trust, humor, and the occasional impossible solution when life turned chaotic. Romantic probability, error, infinity undefined. Conclusion, humans call this love. The microwave was right. It usually was these days. So here we are, fellow space travelers and microwave whisperers. You've just witnessed Jake Murphy's journey from zero to hero, or more accurately, from guy who eats noodles alone to guy who eats noodles with alien royalty. If you're wondering what happened next, well, 3 years later, Jake's trying to install a baby-proof lock on Mike while the microwave protests. Infant Human 2.0 has already calculated 17 methods of breaching this security. Also, she has your stubbornness and her mother's tactical genius. We are doomed. Little Zara Murphy Denayrit, 18 months old, green-skinned with her father's brown eyes, has indeed figured out how to reprogram the palace security system using a modified teething ring. Her younger brother, still in Fleur's arms, is thankfully only interested in pulling Jake's hair and blowing bubbles that somehow defy 3 laws of physics. "Mike, you're supposed to be helping," Jake mutters, wrestling with the lock. "I am helping. I am documenting your failure for posterity. Future generations will learn from your mistakes." Fleur, watching from the doorway while bouncing baby Marcus, laughs. "You know, most people use normal babysitters. Most people's babysitters can't instantly heat formula while simultaneously teaching advanced calculus through interpretive toast patterns. Jake counters. And that's the thing about complicated love stories. They don't end with happily ever after. They continue with sleepless nights, arguments about whose turn it is to change the anti-grav diaper, and discovering that your toddler has inherited both parents' gifts for chaos. They continue with Mike teaching the kids Earth lullabies while secretly recording their first words for a compilation video titled Human Larvae, a Longitudinal Study. They continue with Nana teaching her great-grandchildren the correct way to disable someone using just a knitting needle for self-defense, dears. Prince Octonius drops by weekly for Uncle Octi's 8-armed hugs. Parsec Express now delivers to 12 galaxies, and Veron sends birthday cards from his temporal therapy center, all arriving simultaneously across different timelines. Life, as Jake learned, isn't about avoiding complications. It's about finding the ones worth embracing. Did this story work? Did it make you laugh, roll your eyes, maybe believe for a moment that love can bloom in the strangest places, even between a lazy genius and a warrior princess with a plasma rifle? Did it remind you that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst pickup jobs? Drop me a comment, leave a review, or just whisper to your own suspicious household appliances. Though maybe check if they're secretly ancient alien technology first. You never know. And remember, whether you're navigating asteroid fields or navigating relationships, the secret is the same. Sometimes you just have to activate your shield porridge and hope for the best. Until our next adventure in the cosmos, your friendly neighborhood space romance author. P.S. Mike wanted me to add probability of reader satisfaction, calculating. Error. Satisfaction is subjective. Recommendation. Trust your organic emotional response system, feelings. Also, check your microwave. It might be lonely. P.P.S. If you're Marcus Webb and you're reading this, Jake says hi. He's too busy being happy to hate you anymore. But Mike has your credit card information and will sign you up for every alien newsletter in existence if you even think about stealing anything else. Just saying.